China has the world's largest fishing industry, but reports of human rights abuses on board its ships are rampant.
So what we found definitively is that the Chinese fleet is engaged in pretty severe labor abuses, trafficking, wage theft, criminal neglect, people starving to death.
On land, we investigate allegations of Uyghur laborers forced to work in Chinese seafood processing units.
There are a lot of research how China is using this Uyghurs as a cheap labor and how these big companies are complicit with this.
We reveal 5 Japanese companies who've been sourcing produce linked to alleged forced Uyghur labor.
Japanese companies, because they are the buyers, they have a big power what they can do.
101 East investigates the deadly secrets of China's massive fishing fleet and the price we pay for seafood. Indonesia is one of the largest suppliers of labor to the global fishing industry. I've come to the capital, Jakarta, to meet 25-year-old Christian Jansen. From 2018, he worked for almost 2 years as a deckhand on a Chinese squid vessel called VU-18.
Hello, Jansen. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming.
His experience on board the ship was so harrowing that he never wants to work in fishing again.
Kondisinya sangat buruk sekali. Kondisi kerja sendiri sih, kalau masalah minum, awalnya itu kita dikasih ada pembagian. Tapi setelah habis itu nggak ada lagi, kita minumnya dari air laut yang disuling. Nah, masalah tidur sendiri, kalau pas lagi musim ikan, tidurnya itu paling sedikit itu, paling lama itu 4 jam. Paling sedikit 2 jam.
He says frequent beatings came without warning.
Itu hampir semua sih yang anak-anak BK itu hampir semua kena kekerasan waktu kerja di kapal. Kita ini dianggaplah kita kayak binatang diperlakukan seperti itu.
But with a promised monthly salary of $300, Jansen and his colleagues were willing to put up with it all. Until one day in September 2019.
Ya, tentunya yang paling menyedihkan ketika teman kami meninggal ya, almarhum Fadil. Jadi itu merasa sangat terpukul sekali. Sorry.
Fadil had been sick for a few days when his whole body started swelling. He begged the vice captain to let him off the ship to seek medical care. Instead, he was given over-the-counter painkiller medication and told he couldn't leave because his contract had not ended.
Pada hari-hari terakhir itu sebelum dia meninggal, almarhum Fadil sebelum meninggal, dia sempat bicara sama Gandhi, sama saya juga, mungkin sama teman yang lain juga. Kalau misalkan dia meninggal, mayatnya harus dilihat sama orang tuanya.
The captain of VU-18 told the Indonesian deckhands that Fadil's parents had consented to his burial at sea. A Chinese deckhand secretly took these images and helped Jansen smuggle them off the ship when it finally docked 9 months later.
Itu sangat menyakitkan sekali. Sampai sekarang pun saya nggak kuat kalau diceritakan seperti ini.
Aku sayang yang sedang.
Fadil's story was only publicly reported in 2023 as part of an investigation by an American non-profit journalism group, the Outlaw Ocean Project. I traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet the group's founder, Ian Urbina.
So the China investigation focused on 4 regions. So Chinese fishing vessels along here, especially high seas near the Gambia, so West Africa was one. And then that was one reporting.
Ian and his team spent 4 years tracking China's distant water fleet, fishing vessels that operate in waters outside their own country. These ships can stay at sea for up to 2 years without returning to shore. They've shared all the footage from their investigation with us.
Yeah, I mean, we use drones a lot. That's an infrared drone that allows you to see heat. So what we found definitively is that the Chinese fleet is engaged in pretty severe labor abuses, trafficking, wage theft, criminal neglect, people starving to death, people getting diseases they shouldn't, undocumented workers being held captive, a variety of human rights concerns.
On a trip to the South Atlantic in 2022, they came face to face with the VU-18, the vessel on which Fadil had died.
Are we on the 18? Yes. So this is the VU-18, a ship that we are investigating, and it's nighttime, and it's fishing, and it's got its bulbs going. I was interested in the VU-18 because we had a dead body. We knew the fatality was an Indonesian. We knew the fatality had suspicions around it because the conditions of the body. We quickly found out there was violence on board, there was malnutrition on board, there was captivity, begging to be able to leave, not being able to leave, begging for medical care, not being provided it, etc.
The Outlaw Ocean project tried to make contact with the VU-18 on radio. The ship did not respond. But given the description of Fadil's body, the team were able to ascertain that he most likely died of a preventable disease called beriberi, which kills a number of sailors each year. Back in Indonesia, we traveled to Sigli, Fadil's village in Aceh, a conservative province on the island of Sumatra. Fadil was one of 10 siblings. Today, his elder brother Ari works in the fish market where Fadil once did.
Kata dia mau kerja. Habis itu orang tua sudah melarang, jangan pergi, nggak apa-apa, Mak.
Ari invites us home to meet his parents.
Ini barat baju yang dikembalikan oleh kru kapal pada anak saya.
At first, Fadil kept in touch with his family through social media. Then suddenly, he stopped posting.
Nggak tahu, kami bikin di surat kabar oleh Yara bahwa ABK yang bernama Fadil hilang pertama kali. Ada di Google, hilang.
Three months after his death, the family received a letter from PT Shafar Abadi, the agency that recruited Fadil, informing them about his demise. It did not state the cause of death.
Dengan ini, bahwa kru PT Shafar Abadi dengan atas nama Fadil yang bergabung di kapal FU nomor 18 meninggal dunia. Untuk itu perusahaan akan bertanggung jawab atas klaim asuransi jiwa sebesar 150 juta. Kemudian perusahaan memberikan uang duka sebanyak 25 juta.
But Ari tells us that 4.5 years after that letter, the company has not paid the family any money. We wrote to the agency asking for details about the compensation, but did not receive a response. Ari and his family are traumatized that Fadil was prevented from getting medical treatment and his body was dumped in the sea.
Lalu PT Safar Abadi yang nama saya, dia bilang sama kapten kapal, kami keluarga setuju bahwa Fadil dilarungkan ke laut. Padahal kami tidak bilang apa-apa.
I asked Ari if he was angry about what happened to his brother.
Mau marah buat siapa? Mau ngadu tempat siapa? Kita kan orang nggak punya.
Fishing is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. A recent estimate suggests that 100,000 people die each year. That's more than 300 deaths a day.
The extent of violence and abuse is shocking. People die from falling overboard or some big piece of machinery hits them and they die from sickness and infection. But the core element that underlies both is because these workplaces are so far from shore, the chance of getting help anytime quickly is so low. So that's why so many people die.
In February 2022, after multiple requests, Ian and his team got permission to board a Chinese squid vessel in the Falkland Islands and see the conditions for themselves.
Oh, wow. Sleep out here. If you're going to think of the blue part of the planet and think of the biggest players out there, you can't look away from China, especially when it comes to distant water fishing fleets. China has a bigger fleet than the next 3 fleets combined. They are the superpower of seafood.
Ian and his team were closely followed by a minder appointed by the captain.
There's so much that you can think you know until you're actually there. You really want to smell, taste, feel the space. You want to see the living quarters, the bathrooms, the food they're eating.
At one point, the minder is called away by the captain. 2 Chinese deckhands then approached the team. Neither wanted their identities disclosed for fear of retaliation.
回到大陆的话，我们可以向你提供更多的信息，或者是说中国的大使馆、阿根廷的中国的大使馆。因为我们的证件很多都被扣押了嘛，他不给我们吗？因为这上面有很多东西不方便透露，因为说毕竟在这条船上工作。他也不给我们船走，就算打个比方，我们不是违约嘛，然后我也说1分工钱我不要，他也不能让我们走。起码80%的人都是这样。
Minutes after this meeting, Ian and his team were ushered off the ship. But over the course of their 4-year investigation, they boarded more than 20 Chinese vessels, including this ship off the high seas in Gambia.
There was this space, it's like a crawl space, where all these guys were sleeping in.
Six of you. 6 people we are sleeping in there. Sometimes we close here, but the water still is coming in.
So hot. This is, I've never ever seen this bad. You know, there's this famous quote about they're the living, they're the dead, and they're the people at sea. The implication being that the sea is sort of this watery purgatory. It's an in-between space where you're neither living nor dead. And I think that really sums up what I saw.
But allegations of labor abuse in the Chinese fishing industry are not limited to just ships at sea. The Outlaw Ocean Project also investigated seafood processing plants in China.
The kind of broad question that animated us at the beginning was, can we see into the plants, and can we see if there are any worries of any sort?
The team soon discovered that Uyghurs, a persecuted Muslim minority from landlocked Xinjiang, were sent thousands of kilometers away to the coastal province of Shandong. There, under the Chinese government's labor transfer program, they were put to work in several seafood processing plants from 2018 until at least May 2023.
你以为山东有爱情吗？ 那你就想多了。山东只有每天5点半起床，上不完的班，磨不快的刀，开不完的鱼。
Ian's team mined thousands of videos posted on the Chinese social media platform Douyin. They were from accounts that had been registered in Xinjiang, but were now posting regularly from inside seafood processing units in Shandong, using songs, poetry, and language that were characteristic of the Uyghurs.
The videos are rich. Some of them are actual sort of modes of resistance, right? These are people that are very unhappy and they're trying to say that, but they have to do it in a coded, discreet way. Because if they say it explicitly, they could get in big trouble with the government.
你一个月工资多少
？3000。
那你为什么还这么开心？
因为我没有办法。
Uyghur workers live in dormitories in Shandong, allegedly under the watch of security personnel.
We found that a lot of these parent companies that own the plants were very open in their own internal newsletters about their use of Xinjiang Uyghur workers. They thanked the government for having sent them a whole batch. Because in China, it's not illegal. So they didn't have anything to hide from their perspective, but to the rest of the world, it's a big problem.
In Washington, D.C., I'm meeting Omar Kanath, a Uyghur activist who's been following the Chinese labor transfer program closely.
So how do you use it?
Yeah, this is... We call it Hasha. This is the name of the forced labor for Chinese government forced the Uyghurs to work. They are being relocated thousands of miles from their families, from their communities. So in these factories, for example, in mainland China, the Uyghurs have to speak Chinese. They cannot practice their religion. They cannot practice their culture. They don't have contact with their family members.
The Chinese government did not respond to our request for comment, but has said previously that the allegation of forced labor is nothing but an enormous lie propagated by anti-China elements. Activists say it's not just the Chinese government who face such allegations. The Outlaw Ocean project was able to connect the processing plants in Shandong to some of the largest seafood companies in the world. In total, seafood connected to alleged forced Uyghur labor was imported into more than 20 countries, including the United States, France, Germany, and Japan.
We were able to find out large amounts of seafood tied to the forced labor was going into Japan.
They found that 5 major Japanese companies imported seafood from the processing plants in Shandong between 2018 and 2023. Their names are being disclosed for the first time here, and they include 2 of the world's largest seafood companies, Nisui and Maruhanichiro. Others, like Zensho, Hanwha, and Marubeni, are household names in Japan. I worked with a Japanese advocacy organization called Human Rights Now to contact these companies.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Yuka.
Nice to meet you, Yuka. This is Human Rights Now?
Yes, this is our office.
Except Nisui, I got a response from
everyone.
Yeah.
Same.
But for the Maruhanichiro, I think the response to you is more kind of in detail. Yeah, they admitted that there was Uyghur laborers, but they say like there was no discrimination and they payments like as equal as other. And because of the COVID-19, they all gradually kind of went back their region.
In fact, the Outlaw Ocean Project's evidence shows that the processing plant Maruhanichiro sourced seafood from employed Uyghur laborers as recently as May 2023.
They say like there was Uyghur, workers, but there was no forced labor there. And they say like they...
One of the companies we wrote to, Hanwha, admitted they had done business with a Shandong processor on our list, but said they only became aware of the presence of Uyghur laborers there after receiving our email. Another company, Marubeni, said that they no longer work with the Shandong processor, but refused to elaborate if they cut ties following the allegations of forced labor in their supply chain or before.
I think they more think this as a reputational risk, not human rights risks. They need to use their leverage. And I think in terms of this, Japanese companies, because they are the buyers, they are importers, they have a big power, what they can do.
The United States, unlike Japan, prohibits the importation of goods produced by forced Uyghur labor in Xinjiang. And yet, over the last 5 years, the American government itself has spent more than $200 million buying seafood from importers tied to the Shandong processing plants.
The hearing will come to order, and I want to welcome each and every one of you to this hearing.
In October 2023, Ian Urbina testified before a Congressional Committee on China.
We now see that hundreds of seafood companies are tied to these Chinese ships and these Chinese factories. The question is, what will industry and government do about it?
Today, we're meeting with Ian outside the US Congress. He's been invited to speak with Democrat Congressman Jared Huffman, who's on the House Fisheries Subcommittee. In January 2024, Huffman led a bipartisan effort urging President Biden to demand that a key seafood supplier to the US government sever ties with the processing plants in Shandong.
It's just remarkable that right downstairs in this building, hundreds of congressional staffers and members of Congress have been buying sushi and other seafood products provided by Cisco that you have linked to forced labor in China.
A lot of companies responded, Cisco included, we're taking this seriously, we're looking into it, we'll get back to you. And usually that's the play. Hopefully the reporter will go away. And my hope is to not go away. And so...
They do the same thing with congressmen.
Right.
Several companies use the argument that with the lengthy supply chain between vessels, processing plants, and exporters, it's almost impossible to track the origin of seafood.
It also happens to be very profitable for them to blind themselves to the details. That answer is not going to be good enough with me. It's not going to be good enough with the American people and the American seafood consumers. We're going to demand change because we know too much.
In early June, the US government banned imports from seafood processor Shandong Meijia Group. Back in Indonesia, Fadil's family is still dealing with their loss.
Selama Bang Fadil meninggal, agak berubah. Nah, yang dulunya misalnya kayak gini-gini, sekarang jadi pendiam. Setiap orang menanyakan tentang Fadil, dia cuma bisa nangis.
The family prays for Fadil every day. And they warn other young men from their village who are still leaving to work on fishing vessels.
Kalau mau merantau dipikir dulu. Bukan negara kita yang seenaknya kita boleh pulang, boleh tidur di mana-mana. Kan kita nggak seenak di kampung kita, tidur di pos ini, tidur di pos itu.
The scale of China's fishing industry is formidable. But it can take a tragic toll on people like Fadil, Yansen, and the Uyghurs allegedly forced to work in Chinese factories. Until regulators, seafood companies, and consumers demand greater accountability, it'll be tough to ensure the seafood we eat is not tied to slavery and forced labor.